Welcome to the Nonviolent Jesus podcast. I'm John, Father John Deere, and today I'm speaking with my friend, Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. This is a project of beatitudecenter.org, where you can find many other podcasts and regular Zoom programs on the nonviolence of Jesus and working for peace and justice in a more nonviolent world. So we always begin with a little prayer, so I just invite everybody just to take a deep breath wherever you are. Let's just pause for a moment and relax. And I invite you to enter into the presence of the God of peace who loves you infinitely and personally and everyone everywhere. And let's take a moment to ask for whatever graces to follow the nonviolent Jesus and to do God's will and to be a peacemaker. Beloved God of peace, thank you for all the blessings of life, love, and peace that you give us. Be with us now as we reflect with Jamie on your call to work for a more nonviolent, more just world. Bless us, inspire us, disarm us, strengthen us, and send us out to do your will, to do our part to help end poverty, racism, violence, greed, injustice, war, fascism, nuclear weapons, environmental destruction, that we might be your holy peacemakers and welcome your reign of universal love and peace on earth. Amen. It's a great pleasure, friends, to welcome my friend Congressman Jamie Raskin, one of the strongest voices and advocates for democracy and truth in these insane times. Jamie represents Maryland's 8th Congressional District in the House of Representatives. After the violent insurrection at the Capitol on January 6, 2021, he led the second impeachment trial of Donald Trump, which ended in the most sweeping bipartisan vote to convict and impeach president in history. He also served on the committee to investigate the January 6th attack. Before that, Jamie Raskin was a state senator in Maryland where he helped abolish the death penalty and gain marriage equality. And before that, he was professor of constitutional law at American University for more than 25 years. He's authored several books, including the New York Times bestseller Unthinkable, Trauma, Truth, and the Trials of American Democracy, about the death of his beloved son Tommy, followed a few weeks later by the January 6th insurrection. Jamie's a graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Law School and a former editor of the Harvard Law Review. Congressman Jamie Raskin, welcome to the Nonviolent Jesus podcast.
Well, John, I feel like I've finally made it by getting onto your podcast. And thank you for having me, man, and thank you for everything that you do every day.
Well, first of all, thank you for all your great leadership on behalf of all the country and all your efforts to promote democracy, justice, truth, and dare I say, Jamie, just plain sanity. I thought we could jump right into the deep end together since we don't have too much time and just ask you to give us your take on what's happening now as we come to the end of the year and the first 11 months of the second Trump administration, in terms of the Constitution, democracy, just an overview in your own words.
Well, we're in the fight of our lives, and we have been since the beginning of this nightmare. And, the way I feel about it is, you can have a good day, like we had a smashing election with Democratic victories in Virginia, New York, New Jersey, California, Mississippi, Georgia, around the country. Or the other day, we totally had a political tidal wave wash out Donald Trump's opposition to release of the Epstein files, which isn't to say it's over because they'll continue to resist every step of the way. But we had an almost unanimous vote in the House and then a unanimous vote very quickly thereafter in the Senate, which was precisely what they didn't want. So the way I think about it is you can have a great day like that, and then you go home and you go to sleep and you wake up and you start all over again at the bottom of the hill. I mean, we are not through this thing until we're through this thing. But I'll tell you that the forces of democracy and freedom and rule of law, moral progress for our people are galvanized and mobilizing all over the country. And people want to be participating in the kinds of victories that they saw in those 5 or 6 states a couple weeks ago.
You know, I've been so moved by your passion for democracy. I've been with you and heard you speak, and I don't know anyone who speaks on behalf of democracy like you. So let me just ask you to talk about that a little, your vision, your hope, your aspirations for democracy.
Well, thank you for saying that, John. I suppose that my faith in democracy and my faith in the people really is my ultimate, foundational, irreducible political and spiritual faith. And that doesn't mean that the people are always right. It doesn't mean that the majority is always right. But it does mean that popular government and belief in the wisdom of crowds is the foundation for the protection of people's freedom and the moral and spiritual odysseys that we're on, because the dictators of the world, the Vladimir Putins, the Donald Trumps, the Viktor Orbáns, the Kim Jong-uns, the King Georges, the Mussolinis are never going to be protecting people's freedom. So democracy is the precondition for freedom. And then democracy itself is not just a static collection of rules and procedures and rights. Democracy is a project, and it's an unfinished draft always. Democracy is always moving forward. You know, Tocqueville said in Democracy in America that democracy and voting rights in our country are either shrinking and shriveling away, or they're growing and expanding. And we've clearly been in this terrible contractionary mode with the Supreme Court dismantling the Voting Rights Act and so many voter suppression and disenfranchisement mechanisms being adopted by the GOP all over the country. We've got to get back on the growth track for democracy, because democracy is the system that allows every one person to have a vote, every one person to have a voice, and together we can speak and listen to each other and reason together, and then that provides for the emergence of what Tom Paine called common sense, the sense we have in common. So I view democracy as the system that will give each of us individually our freedom, or at least has the chance to give us our freedom. It's necessary, they're not sufficient. And then also the chance for common sense to prevail and for the best moral instincts of human beings to emerge and to prevail.
You know, I was with you earlier this year in LA, and you started to talk about Thomas Paine, one of the early visionaries of the country, the author of Common Sense. And I see him referred to in your books. And again, I've never heard anybody talk about him in my life. Tell me why, how can we all be inspired by Thomas Paine and his message for today, since you've invoked him?
Yeah, well, I mean, Tom Paine was considered a terrible professional and existential failure when he was back over in Europe. And he heard about America, and for him it was tantalizing. He felt very stultified in his career, and he made a connection with Ben Franklin when he was in Europe, and Franklin wrote him a letter of introduction, and that's what opened some doors for him. You know, when he arrived in Philadelphia, and he got to the country in 1774, 2 years before the Revolution, to fall in love with the promise of America. And he said, if this land lives up to its real values and ideals, it will become, he said, an asylum to humanity. And not an insane asylum, okay, but a place of refuge for people seeking freedom from intellectual and religious and political persecution from all over the world. And then he threw himself into the American Revolution, and he wrote Common Sense, which became, the organizing polemic and document of the revolution. I mean, before Paine, even the most radical revolutionaries like, Ben Franklin or Jefferson, they were talking about separation from England and not having a king anymore. But they really had not put this in terms of a shift to a completely different kind of government based on, what Jefferson would call the consent of the governed. We the people is the phrase in the Constitution, and the unalienable rights of the people, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And, the proposition that everybody's created equal. And of course, a lot of those beautiful ideals were absolutely honored in the breach at the beginning. I mean, we began as a slave republic of Christian white male property owners over the age of 21. But because of Paine, Jefferson and the Revolution were able to commit those ideals to paper, and they became the organizing concepts for every great civilizing movement America's ever had, from the abolitionists to the suffragettes to the civil rights movement, the peace movement, the labor movement, the human rights movement, the LGBTQ movement, all of them have taken up that call. And as Dr. King said, in his speech in Memphis before his death, he said, all we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. And so we do have those organizing ideals and values that we try to validate through social and political struggle. And that's why I say democracy is not just a system of rules and rights and values, which it is, but it is also an unfinished draft. It is a process in motion. It's a project, and we're all invested in it.
In Los Angeles, you were speaking to us about the Constitution, and you were saying it was completely under attack, every sentence, and being dismantled very systematically as we move into authoritarianism and fascism and white supremacy. We could analyze it in various ways. I wonder if you could say something about that. And then your response there, you also said that the hope right now you saw is in the lower courts, who seem to be doing their job, and then the grassroots movements like the No Kings movement and the importance of protests. And I want you to talk about that too.
I mean, democracy is the thing that we all take care of together. So where would we be without the No Kings movement right now? We'd be in a very different place. I mean, the No Kings movement set the stage for the great electoral victories we had around the country. And the rule of law is actually holding very strong in the district courts and the appeals courts. Our main problem is the utterly gerrymandered and stacked and packed and sliced and diced and loaded Roberts Court, and that's the problem we've got to deal with. But yeah, the whole Constitution is under attack, and we need the whole people to defend it. I mean, just today, look at what's going on. A number of my colleagues, Jason Crow, who's in the House, Alyssa Slotkin, who's in the Senate, a bunch of other ones, released a statement as members of Congress and former members of armed services, and it was a message that they put out to people wearing the uniform, saying that you've sworn an oath, which is a constitutional oath. It's actually in the Constitution, calling for an oath for members of Congress, for the president, and then we use it for everybody else down the line. And they said you've sworn an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And then they restated the point that members of our military have an obligation to disobey and refuse unlawful orders. And they said what a difficult time it was for them, and they know how hard this is, but you must maintain your oath to the Constitution. Well, Donald Trump read that and then proceeded to say that this was treason, this was sedition. He's retweeting things saying that, this is punishable by death. These people should be hanged, and so on. I mean, this is very basic. That we have no kings here. In fact, we do not have a supreme leader. We have a supreme constitution. And, what's the president's job? The core of the president's job is to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. That's all. And, sometimes my colleagues will get up and say, Mr. President, stop doing this. Stop trampling the Constitution. We're a co-equal branch over here in Congress. And it just infuriates me, John. I get up and I say, actually, no, we're not a co-equal branch. First of all, co-equal is not even a word. Okay, that's like extremely unique or something like that. But you're saying we're an equal branch. No, we are the Article I branch. We are the lawmaking branch. I mean, you start with the preamble to the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and preserve to ourselves and our posterity the blessings of liberty, do hereby ordain and establish the Constitution of the United States. That sets up the Constitution. It sets up the government. It sets up the country. And the very next sentence flows into Article I, and it says, all legislative power is vested in a Congress of the United States. And then it just lays out all the powers we got, all the powers that Donald Trump has been usurping. We've got the power to impose taxes and tariffs, not Donald Trump. We've got the power to declare war if there's going to be war, not a president who thinks he's a king, and so on, right? And so The president's job is to take care that the laws we pass are faithfully executed. And so a lot of what we're trying to make happen now is just to restore that basic constitutional balance.
Wow. So say something to our listeners, mainly activists and people of faith and conscience around the country, involved probably for many years, on, that their part about taking to the streets, continuing to organize, continuing to build up No Kings, and all the other kinds of protests is really important as balance to what you're doing to uphold the Constitution and promote democracy. In other words, what would your message be to ordinary people who are in the streets who feel so helpless but are marching and wonder if it makes a difference?
Well, I went to the last No Kings March. I accepted an invitation to go speak at the Philadelphia March, and it was awesome. It was right out in front of Constitution Hall, where the Declaration was signed, where the Constitution was written. And I said, none of us is going to be founding fathers in the 18th century, but all of us can be founding fighters in the 21st century. That is, we're going to have to renew the social compact and the social contract. We're going to have to build on the Constitution we have to toughen it up in many places, make it much stronger, more resilient, and more durable against authoritarian, autocratic, theocratic, plutocratic elite attack. We're going to have to strengthen our Constitution and strengthen the rule of law. I mean, Donald Trump has absolutely dissolved the boundary between the presidency and private money making. That was one of the original walls of separation that was built into the Constitution, right? Article 1, Section 9 says that, none of us in public office, including the president, can receive a present, an emolument, which means a payment, an office or title of any kind, whatever, from a king, prince, or foreign state without the express consent of Congress. And now that's been completely trampled. The Constitution also says that the president may receive only his salary in office and nothing more and nothing less. And Donald Trump has just gone into business, and he's just destroyed that idea that the presidency is not a for-profit money-making proposition. So we're going to have to really rebuild the constitutional and legal architecture around that, just to give you one example. I mean, another is, the separation of church and state is constantly under attack now. One of the reasons why we have such beautiful religious and spiritual traditions here in America is because it's not run by a king or by the government or by the state, but they're constantly trying to bulldoze that wall. I had a colleague who got up on the floor of the House, John, who said, the moral downfall of America was in 1962 in Engel versus Vitale, when the Supreme Court banned prayer in the public schools. And I got up and I said, you know what? The Supreme Court never banned prayer in the public schools. As long as there are pop math quizzes, there will be prayer in the public schools. And as long as Donald Trump is president, there will be prayer in the public schools. But, it doesn't end with these people. Texas, Louisiana recently voted to endorse the 10 Commandments and post them in every classroom. They didn't say which 10 Commandments, because I found about 50 different versions of it online. There are a lot of different versions. But in any event, I knew my colleagues would come in, as they did in the Judiciary Committee, the Oversight Committee, and they say, we need to endorse the 10 Commandments. We need to post the 10 Commandments. And I say, well, the 10 Commandments seem to have been doing fine for millennia without an endorsement by the House of Representatives, without an endorsement by the Freedom Caucus. No, this one guy tells me, I got confused here, John. He says, well, the 10 Commandments are the basis for the Bill of Rights. And it was confusing because I said, well, I know there's 10 in each one. That's true. But let's test the proposition. The first commandment says, thou shalt have no other God before me. And the First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. But we went to the Rules Committee, they wanted an up or down vote on the entire 10 Commandments. I said, you know what? If we're going to vote on the 10 Commandments, we should have to vote on each commandment separately, okay, and not the omnibus package that they're working on. And you shouldn't be able to vote for any commandment you yourself have ever violated, because then you'll be taking the name more in vain. So
I'm getting a headache thinking of that. So, Jamie, you and I are very devoted to Martin Luther King Jr. And recently I spoke with Andrew Young and even Joan Baez, who was a very close friend of his. And, I've been spending my life teaching Kingian nonviolence, and even saying nonviolence is at the heart of all the religions of the world, but especially I'm trying to get Christians to realize that Jesus was nonviolence. I think as things continue to get worse and are collapsing, that nonviolence is needed now more than ever. I mean, even with the threats of nuclear weapons and catastrophic climate change. I wondered if you might say a word or two about the role of people who are teaching and promoting and strategizing and organizing along Kingian nonviolence and Christian nonviolence, and how important that is everywhere in this country as it's collapsing.
Well, I think that's the whole thing. And that's why I love your work so much. I mean, I think this is the essence of it. I mean, democracy and the rule of law, which supports democracy, which supports in turn freedom. Democracy is the system which relies on nonviolent verbal expression and conflict resolution as opposed to violent assault. And at least so I would argue, and so you would argue, and I think everybody who wants our best religious traditions to be embodied in political democracy. But there's another tradition too. Donald Trump now is the standard bearer of it. For him, he gets in office, and the first thing he wants to do is to begin to unleash the militia, right? Invoke the National Guard to go and attack people in their communities, and to use ICE, to show up with masked officers in unmarked cars to conduct warrantless arrests against people who have not committed any crimes, and many of whom now turn out to be citizens. But in any event, basically he's saying, well, democracy is the system where the guy who's got the most money can get into office and use it to make more money, and then unleash the violent powers of the state against vulnerable communities. And the other tradition is the Kingian tradition, which I think goes back to Tom Paine and the abolitionists and the suffragists and so on, which is that no, democracy is the constant progress towards a more perfect union, towards greater inclusion, greater participation, and greater dignity for everybody, uplifting people rather than tearing people down. And so that's the fight that we're in today. What will the meaning of democracy be? Will democracy survive against all the autocrats and dictators?
Jamie, I found this quote, I don't know if I ever told you, from Gandhi around early 1930, 32, before World War II, where he says democracy is supposed to be expanding, as you're saying, welcoming, getting bigger and widening and moving toward nonviolence, that we're ultimately moving toward a nonviolent democracy. If it doesn't, Gandhi said before Hitler, it has to move toward fascism. What do you think of that? Isn't that brilliant?
Well, but I think that's sort of like the sentiment expressed by Tocqueville I was talking about before, where he said, democracy is either shrinking and shriveling away and moving into another form of government, or it's expanding and growing. We got to get back on the growth track. This is why, I say, look, hey, it's 2025. How about we start electing the president the way we elect governors and representatives and senators and mayors and everybody else? Whoever gets the most votes wins. We don't need an anti-democratic system of electing a president. And it was something I agree with Trump about. He says statehood, but I'm not talking about Canada and Greenland and Panama, which haven't sought admission to America. I'm talking about 713,000 tax-paying draftable citizens in Washington, D.C., or 3.5 million U.S. citizens in Puerto Rico. These people need to be admitted as states. D.C. has petitioned for admission as union. In 2 and 3 Congresses ago, we passed D.C. statehood. I was the floor leader with Eleanor Holmes Norton. I got up and I said, I want to thank the residents of Washington who have a genuine political grievance against the Congress, but didn't come down here and beat the daylights out of our police officers and put them in the hospital and give people heart attacks and strokes and fractured skulls. They did it the right way. They petitioned for admission to the Union. And why would we not admit them the way we've admitted 37 other states since the original 13? And I'm speaking as a congressman from one of those original 13. We are both a star and a stripe on the flag, but I'm proud to say we've always supported the admission of other states. So we should not be ruling over people without their own participation.
Let me ask you then just a word, and it's hard to even bring it up, Jamie, but about January 6th, 2021. In your big New York Times, I think it was #1 bestseller, your book, Unthinkable, Trauma, Truth, and the Trials of American Democracy. You share about your own battle with cancer, the death of your beloved son, Tommy, and then just a few weeks later, the January 6th insurrection. You were in your office with your daughter and son-in-law under the table, and you said it was the most horrific day ever. What do you think about now when you think about those times, and what did you learn? For example, a lot of those people who attacked the building you were in have been pardoned. And anyway,
Yes.
or do you not think
Yeah,
about
well,
it that much? Do you just keep plowing
oh,
ahead?
no, I do think about it a lot, John. I mean, and because it's like Faulkner said, the past isn't dead; it isn't even past. Trump pardoned nearly 1,600 of the insurrectionists the day he got back in. So it violated the basic principle of pardons, which is you look at each person's individual case, you see whether they've repaid their debt to society. Are they showing contrition? Are they showing repentance? Are they showing rehabilitation? He just did a mass pardon of everybody, not because they were innocent, but just because he wanted to create a private militia for himself going forward. So not only in there were people who were armed robbers, drug dealers, gun traffickers, child sex abusers, but after he pardoned them, there has been a spate of crimes committed by these people. And I read off a whole list of them yesterday in the Judiciary Committee. There are armed robberies taking place, there are home invasions, there are burglaries, more child sex abuse materials, on and on. Simply because this wasn't a pardon based on proper mercy, either because they were innocent, none of them were, but it was not for that, nor was it for the fact that they had somehow repented of their offenses and asked for forgiveness and wanted to be rebonded to society. They're utterly unrepentant and think that they've done nothing wrong, and essentially are available to try to be of service to Donald Trump again in the future. So it was a horrific day. And we can never forget that the violent insurrection was surrounding an inside political coup. The idea was to coerce Vice President Mike Pence to say that he was going to reject the Electoral College votes from a number of states, including Georgia and Arizona and Pennsylvania and Michigan, which he had no power to do, and then declare either that Trump had won or that there was no majority in the Electoral College, and then it would be referred to the House of Representatives for a vote. And in that so-called contingent election, we'd be voting on the basis of one state, one vote, rather than one member, one vote, and the Republicans controlled more states. So they knew either way that was going to lead to a victory for them. And Pence refused to go along with the plan, which is why the insurrectionists were chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Hang Mike Pence. I can still hear it like it was yesterday. And he got chased out of the building. And there was, mass bloodshed with 140 officers wounded and hospitalized and disfigured and disabled. But there was a method to the madness. The violence wasn't just to unleash all of this fury against Congress. It was actually to effectuate Donald Trump's overthrow of the presidential election, which Biden had won by more than 7 million votes, 306 to 232 in the Electoral College. So it is a struggle between constitutional democracy in America and authoritarianism.
Jamie, since we only have a minute or two left, what sustains you these days? How do you remain hopeful as you keep leading us forward in pursuit of democracy?
We've got a lot of wonderful children in our family.
Yes, you do.
And nothing can take my mind off of Donald Trump and MAGA more than being with the kids. And the truth is that I am out organizing all of the time. I mean, we need to take Congress back. I'm the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee. I'll be the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. When we win Congress back next year, it's less than a year away. And everybody needs to incorporate in whatever other organizing they're doing and whatever other work they're doing, voter registration and mobilizing people to be engaged in the process of democracy.
Do you have any final word of encouragement for our listeners?
Well, I derive great encouragement from what you're doing, John, every day. When I was growing up, my father used to say, when everything looks hopeless, you're the hope. And so everybody go out there and be the hope for other people who need you. And undoubtedly, there are many who need the sustenance of your friendship and your love.
Well, thank you so much, Jamie Raskin, for speaking with me today. And thank you, friends, for listening to another episode of the Nonviolent Jesus podcast. You can hear more podcasts and find other upcoming Zoom programs at beatitudecenter.org. And you can also sign up there to receive a free e-blast with upcoming news about future podcasts and Zoom programs. If you can, please offer a donation to support this free work and leave some positive feedback at whatever platform you use. And also help spread the word by telling friends about this project. So may the God of peace bless you, and keep on following the Nonviolent Jesus. See you next time.